What kind of killer sends letters to the press, dares the police to catch him, and then disappears without a trace? Today, we reopen the case of the Zodiac, the shadow that haunted California. In the late 1960s, California was a place of contrasts. The Bay Area was alive with music, student activism, and a new sense of freedom. Yet beneath this optimism lurked something darker, a wave of violent crime that shattered the sense of safety people once felt, even in quiet suburbs. Among these crimes, one case would become legendary, not because of the number of victims, but because of the mystery that surrounded it. The killer didn't just strike and vanish. He spoke directly to the public, to the media, and to the police. He signed his messages with a chilling symbol, a circle with a cross through it. He called himself the Zodiac, and his name would haunt California and the world for decades to come. The Zodiac story begins, as far as we know, on a cold December night in 1968. David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, were high school sweethearts enjoying their first real date. They drove out to Lake Herman Road, a lover's lane spot near Vallejo, California, a quiet place where local teens went to be alone. What happened next would change everything. Sometime after 10 p.m., a car pulled up beside them. What we know comes from crime scene evidence. The two teens were ordered out of the car. Betty Lou tried to flee. She was shot 5 times in the back. David was shot once in the head at close range. By the time another driver discovered them, both were dead. Police were baffled. The attack seemed planned, yet completely without motive. The victims had no known enemies, nothing was stolen, and the killer left behind no clear clues. Local papers covered the tragedy, but it faded from headlines quickly. No one guessed that this was only the beginning of something far more terrifying. 7 months later, on July 4, 1969, another young couple sat in a car at Blue Rock Springs Park, just a few miles from the first crime scene. Darlene Ferrin, 22, was lively and well-liked. Michael Mageau, 19, was her friend. As they talked, a car pulled in behind them, then left, only to return minutes later. A man got out, approached the passenger side with a flashlight, and opened fire without warning. Michael survived despite multiple gunshot wounds and would later describe the attacker as a stocky white male, about 5'8", possibly in his late 20s or early 30s. Darlene was hit several times and died before help arrived. This time, the killer made contact. Less than an hour later, a calm male voice called the Vallejo Police Department. "I wish to report a double murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." The call was traced to a payphone at a gas station near the police department, but by the time officers arrived, the caller was gone. A pattern was beginning to emerge. Young couples, parked in secluded areas, attacked by an unknown man who seemed to kill for the thrill and who wanted everyone to know it. Before we continue, if you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries and true crime stories, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep exploring chilling cases like this one. It was in August 1969 that the Zodiac truly stepped out of the shadows and into the headlines, not with another murder, but with words. 3 letters arrived at the offices of the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Examiner, and the San Francisco Chronicle. Each was handwritten in slanted, deliberate script and bore the chilling crosshair symbol that would come to define the case. Each letter began the same way. "Dear Editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman." The writer claimed responsibility not only for the December murders, but also for the recent Blue Rock Springs attack. The letters were not rambling confessions, they were challenges. Each contained a piece of a cipher, a grid of strange symbols, letters, and shapes that, when combined, formed a 408-character coded message. The Zodiac demanded the papers publish them on their front pages, or he threatened to spend the weekend killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again until I end up with 12 people over the weekend. The papers complied, printing the ciphers alongside the story. The public was horrified and fascinated. Who could write such a message? What kind of mind enjoyed taunting the police and press? It didn't take long for amateur code breakers to make progress. Within a week, a married couple from Salinas, California, Donald and Betty Harden, cracked the code. What emerged wasn't a confession in the usual sense. Instead, it was a chilling manifesto. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." The message ended abruptly, with several letters still unsolved. But there was no name, no motive, no real clue to who the Zodiac might be, only an unsettling glimpse into a mind that seemed to revel in the terror it caused. The police and press both asked the Zodiac to reveal something only the killer would know, to prove he really committed the crimes. In response, the Zodiac continued writing. His letters included details that weren't made public, and even references to the victims' positions and injuries, confirming that this was indeed the murderer speaking directly to the world. As summer turned to fall, the Bay Area lived in a strange mix of fear and fascination. People double-checked car locks, avoided lovers' lanes, and yet followed each new letter with morbid curiosity. The Zodiac, it seemed, was playing a game, and the entire city had become part of it. As the Zodiac's letters gripped the public's imagination, the killings did not stop. On September 27, 1969, 2 college students, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were enjoying a warm afternoon by Lake Berryessa, about 70 miles from San Francisco. They lay on a blanket, talking and relaxing by the water, unaware that they were being watched. Suddenly, a man appeared from behind a tree. He wore a dark executioner-style hood that covered his entire face, and on his chest a strange emblem, a white circle with a cross through it. He held a gun in one hand and long pieces of pre-cut rope in the other. In a calm voice, he told them he was an escaped convict who needed money and a car to flee to Mexico. Brian and Cecilia did what he asked. They lay face down as he tied them, first Cecilia, then Brian. But instead of leaving, the man pulled out a large knife and stabbed them both repeatedly. Cecilia was stabbed 10 times, Brian 6. When the attacker finally walked away, Brian managed to untie himself and call for help. Both victims were still alive when rescuers arrived, but Cecilia died 2 days later in the hospital. Brian survived and would later describe the attacker's bizarre costume and calm, controlled manner. Before leaving, the Zodiac marked his presence with chilling confidence. He used a black marker to write on Brian's car door the dates of his previous crimes, the time of that day's attack, the number of victims, and his symbol. It was not just murder, it was a signature. 2 weeks later, on October 11th, 1969, the Zodiac struck again, this time in the heart of San Francisco. Paul Stine, a 29-year-old cab driver, picked up a fare near Union Square. As the cab drove into the upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood, the passenger shot Stine in the head at point-blank range. This attack was different. It happened in an urban area, at an earlier hour, and the victim was not a young couple, but a single male. After killing Stine, the Zodiac calmly wiped down parts of the cab, removed a piece of the victim's bloody shirt, and disappeared into the night. Several teenagers witnessed part of the attack from a window and gave police a description: a stocky white male, about 5'8" to 5'10", wearing glasses. In the confusion that followed, a police dispatcher mistakenly told officers to look for a black suspect. The real killer walked right past 2 patrol officers unnoticed. Days later, the Zodiac mailed another letter to the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside was a piece of Paul Stine's blood-soaked shirt, proof, if any were needed, that the letter writer and the killer were the same person. The letter included a new, terrifying threat. Quote, "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." End quote. The threat sparked panic across the city. Parents kept their children home. Police cars followed buses. Some bus drivers even quit. The Zodiac's ability to manipulate fear had become as powerful as his violence. By now, the entire Bay Area felt trapped in a deadly game whose rules only the killer knew. The Zodiac didn't simply kill and disappear. He stayed in the public eye by choice, turning murder into a twisted dialogue with the world. Through the fall of 1969 and into the early 1970s, letters continued to arrive at newspaper offices, each one stranger and more taunting than the last. In these messages, the Zodiac mocked the police for failing to catch him and threatened even more violence. One of his letters included a bomb diagram he claimed he would use to blow up a school bus, describing in detail how the device would be triggered by the movement of the bus. He seemed to enjoy the terror his words created as much as the killings themselves. Another letter contained a Halloween card sent to the San Francisco Chronicle reporter Paul Avery. On the card, Zodiac wrote, "Peekaboo, you are doomed," hinting that Avery might be his next victim. The card triggered widespread fear not just among the public, but also among journalists and police who realized that even those investigating the case were not safe. Zodiac's letters often included new ciphers, strange codes, and cryptic phrases. Some of these ciphers have never been solved, while others revealed chilling confessions and philosophical statements about why he killed. In his writings, the Zodiac claimed he was collecting slaves for the afterlife, and hinted that his identity might be hidden in one of his unsolved codes. As time passed, the Zodiac's tone shifted. Early letters were direct and threatening. Later ones became more mocking and rambling. Some investigators began to suspect that not all letters truly came from the same person, and debates emerged about how many crimes the Zodiac was actually responsible for. The killer himself claimed as many as 37 victims, far more than the 5 confirmed murders. Police could never prove or disprove these claims. The public remained captivated, scanning every new letter for clues. Amateur codebreakers, journalists, and detectives all became part of the search. But despite the efforts of many, the Zodiac's identity and his motives remained locked away behind ciphers, hints, and a chilling confidence that he was smarter than anyone hunting him. Despite thousands of tips and years of investigation, the Zodiac killer was never identified, but a few names rose to the top of the suspect list, each with their own compelling reasons and frustrating dead ends.
Arthur Lee Allen was perhaps the most famous suspect. A former elementary school teacher and convicted child molester, Allen lived in Vallejo, not far from the early murders. He owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch, which bore the same crosshair symbol the killer used. Friends recalled him making chilling statements about wanting to kill people and taunting the police with letters. Police even searched Allen's home in 1972 and again in 1991. But despite circumstantial evidence and suspicious behavior, Allen's handwriting and fingerprints didn't match the Zodiac's, and DNA later taken from envelopes didn't link him to the crimes. Allen died in 1992, leaving investigators still divided about his guilt. Richard Gaikowski, a journalist and editor of an underground newspaper in San Francisco, also caught investigators' attention. He resembled police sketches, lived in the Bay Area at the time of the murders, and had a background in writing that some believed fit the Zodiac style. But once again, no conclusive evidence tied him to the crimes. Rick Marshall, a movie projectionist, became a suspect largely due to speculation and rumors. Some theorists pointed to his interest in ciphers and his residence near crime scenes, but investigators ultimately found no solid connection. Lawrence Kane was another suspect with an intriguing profile. Suffering from brain damage after a car accident, Kane reportedly had memory problems and erratic behavior. He lived near some victims and was identified by a surviving Zodiac victim as resembling her attacker. Yet once again, no physical evidence linked Kane to the Zodiac's letters or the murders. Over the years, other names surfaced, men whose handwriting seemed similar, who lived near the crime scenes, or who had criminal pasts that fueled suspicion. In 2021, a group of cold case investigators, calling themselves the Casebreakers, identified Gary Francis Post as a suspect, claiming to have uncovered evidence connecting him to the Zodiac's cryptic messages. But law enforcement remained unconvinced, citing the lack of definitive proof. In the end, despite the most extensive investigation in California history, the case remains unsolved. Each suspect had pieces that seemed to fit, but never the whole puzzle. The mystery deepened with every clue that failed to lead to an arrest, turning the Zodiac not just into a real-life killer, but a legend built from half-truths, theories, and fear. From the beginning, the Zodiac killer was as much a puzzle maker as a murderer. His letters weren't just confessions or threats. They were games designed to taunt police and terrify the public. The most famous of these were his ciphers, cryptic blocks of symbols, letters, and strange shapes that promised to reveal his secrets, if anyone could solve them. The first major cipher, the 408-character code sent in 3 parts to different newspapers, was cracked by a husband and wife team, Donald and Betty Hardin. The solution was chilling, but offered no real clues to the killer's identity. Quote, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." End quote. The message ended with a jumble of letters that some thought might hide his name, but it led nowhere. Then came the Zodiac's most infamous code, the 340-character cipher, mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle in November 1969. For over 50 years, it resisted every attempt to crack it, despite the efforts of professional cryptologists, law enforcement, and amateur sleuths worldwide. In December 2020, an international team of codebreakers finally decoded it. The message again mocked authorities. Quote, "I hope you are having lots of fun and trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber." End quote. Yet once again, it revealed no name, no motive, only arrogance and a promise of continued mystery. Beyond these, 2 shorter ciphers remain unsolved to this day. One of them, sent with a letter that read, "My name is," followed by 13 mysterious characters, tantalized investigators and amateur sleuths alike. Could the Zodiac really have hidden his identity there? Some experts believe it might be too short to ever solve, or that the killer deliberately included false symbols to ensure it stayed unbroken. The other unsolved cipher, a 32-character puzzle, was sent in April 1970. It contained strange repeated symbols and no obvious pattern. Some believe it might hold another name. Others think it's nothing but a decoy to keep investigators busy. What made the Zodiac cipher so terrifying wasn't just the possibility of discovering who he was, but the way they demonstrated his control over the public and police. By turning his crimes into riddles, he created a narrative that outlived the murders themselves. Decades later, the world is still playing his game, still decoding, still searching, and still haunted by the possibility that somewhere in those symbols lies the name of a killer who walked away